Virtual tabletops are a big deal these days. Fantasy Grounds, Foundry, Roll20, and many more. It provides access for people to play RPGs that otherwise would have a hard time finding a local group, and for those that honestly just want to sit in their house pantsless without having to worry about company coming over, like I am right now. My first in a series of videos covering virtual tabletops for Cypher System by Monty Cook Games is going to focus on the Foundry virtual tabletop. Anyone that knows me knows that Foundry is my virtual tabletop of choice for running most tabletop RPGs. If you want it to be simple and streamlined, it can be, but it also has the capability to have all the bells and whistles thanks to mods. And if you know what you're doing, it is highly customizable since it's easy for you to edit the JavaScript, HTML, and CSS that the structure is built upon. This is probably going to be a bit longer than most of my other Cypher Basics videos because I just want to cover everything for Foundry in one video. Due to the fact that everything kind of ties together, and breaking it up could lead to having to go back and reference other videos for other stuff. So, instead, I'll keep this as a single complete package and make sure to split everything up into easily referenced chapters. Also, this video is not going to be pre-scripted like many of my other videos. I have certain points I need to cover, but it'll be easier if we just explore this together, and I go through the key features. Also a note, this video is currently being made in Foundry version 10, so there may be some changes in later versions of Foundry if you watch this in the future. For example, native support of folders in Compendiums is coming in Foundry version 11, so the mod that I use for Compendium folders will likely not be needed after that point. But, I mean, who knows? So, let's get into it, shall we? When you open your Foundry, the first thing you're going to see is the setup screen. Now, in the future, in version 11, they are going to be changing what this looks like, but the process is basically going to be the same, so we can just still do this and you'll be fine. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to actually go to the game systems, and you're going to want to make sure the Cypher system is installed. You can easily do this by going to the install system button, waiting for the package stuff to come up. Type in Cypher and you'll find Cypher there. Click install. Bob's your uncle, all that good stuff. Once you have the system installed, you're going to go back to your games world or your game worlds, and you're going to want to create a new world. Call it whatever you want for both the data path on what the folder will be called and the name. System, of course, you're going to want to choose the Cypher system. The rest of this is just whatever you want to put. Doesn't matter. Click create world and you'll create a brand new world. Now, I've got one right here already set up, so we're going to launch this and head right into it. Here we go. We are in here. The only changes I've made to this is the fact that I've got some mods installed that are really very useful for Cypher to run. And I've created a simple scene here with just an image background, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is stock Foundry. I've made sure to keep it as close to a fresh basic install as possible. It's not like my full streaming setup that I have with all my extra mods and everything that maybe I'll show off a little bit at the end of the video, but I don't think that's needed if you're just getting into it because you won't have some of the stuff I set up. So first of all, let's see what mods you might need from the mod store. So here we are. I've clicked on the settings. We're going to go to manage modules. You'll notice I have a few modules here. You don't need a ton of them for Cypher. Don't worry about all the other things that are unchecked. I tend to run a bit of a game with bells and whistles for my streaming setup. Also, Cypher Complete is my personal module that you are not unfortunately going to have access to, that has all the stuff that's not in the Cypher SRD, like Numenera and the Strange and everything. The main things that I suggest is, first of all, you're going to need the Cypher SRD Compendium. He's done a great job at making sure all of the system reference document stuff is in there. And of course, the Cypher system reference document, as you may know, is updating over time to include all of the genre white books. So far, it has Godforsaken, the fantasy genre, and the Stars Are Fire, the sci-fi genre, I do believe. So as they're updated, he's plugging them in there. So all of the options are going to be in there. If you want to make sure you have all the stuff for character creation, I do also just suggest the CSRD character creation pack / compendium. This is also kind of a big deal. These two ones are basically all of your info. You're going to get all of your equipment, your character options, rules, everything like this. Now, the other ones I do suggest that are very helpful. Cypher System Combat Tracker is super nice. I'll show that off in a second. Basically, it in the combat tracker, it shows like the different pools for the PCs, color codes things, I think, and shows basically information for NPCs and whatnot. Very helpful, very helpful. I would suggest getting that. And going down to the nice Cypher System add-ons. If you want all of the descriptors, foci, types, everything to be like drag and drop onto character sheets, you're going to want this one because it's going to be super useful for you. Another one that I highly suggest is going to be the Compendiums folder mod, because I just like organization. Compendiums folder not only allows your compendium section to have folders here, but if you look at like my setup, for example, let's go to character options, you'll see that you can put folders right inside of each compendium so that you can just go through, be like, oh, I found my flavors. Awesome. Great. In version 11, I don't know the details of it yet, but in version 11 of Foundry, apparently they're adding native support for compendium folders. I don't know about all the functionality, how it works or anything like that, because it's still in beta testing and I haven't checked it out. So that may be redundant in the future, but as of right now, in version 10 of Foundry, I do highly suggest the Compendiums folder module. Other than that, you're done. The Compendiums folder, of course, has you need libwrapper. It's just a dependency. It itself will not do anything for you other than the fact that it makes some other mods work. It will let you know that you need that one. Yeah, I'll put a link on the screen over that way to show you the list of basically needed mods and like a couple of suggested mods. You just need Cypher System character creation pack, the SRD compendium, and I would say the Cypher System add-ons, the nice Cypher System add-ons. So we've got those modules installed, and you can find how to install those modules in the setup screen where we installed the system and created a new world. There's a modules tab. You can do it right from there. 10 to 1, you know how to figure that part out. This is more about specifically setting up Cypher rather than how to use Foundry as a base. Once you have that set up, you are going to have a bunch of new info. The mods are going to add a bunch of awesome stuff. So in this case, journal entries is going to have a lot of it. It's going to add things like your Cypher System, like here's all the list of like the SRD, foci, and types, and everything like that. Like here, we'll show he's got everything typed in, all nicely formatted. All of the abilities are hot linked and everything. He's even got the rule book stuff going on. So if you need all the information for the Cypher rules. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to go to the settings area here. We want to go to configure settings, and we want to go through the system settings for everything that we have here. So what I've done here is I've kept the settings baseline fresh. I have not touched them. These are what your defaults will probably end up being, but there are a few things I want you to double check just in case, because sometimes they can change with versions and stuff. And one thing I find is very important is left click to release objects. This is a base. It's in the core of Foundry itself. If you don't have this on, then you've got to like click and drag to unselect tokens. Not that it's a big deal in Cypher. I just find a lot of people get confused with this. I think it's on by default now, but it used to not be. So just in case you're running a different version, make sure that is on. I don't think there's much else in the way of stuff here that we need. You may want to go up to your permissions configuration for your players and set some things up in here. That is up to you. It really doesn't have anything to do with Cypher, so we're going to leave it alone. So we start out with the Cypher System settings with roles use effective difficulty. There's kind of two ways you can think about how the effective difficulty works. If this is set to never, then it just gives you what difficulty your role would beat, and then you can adjust it afterwards with everything that you have. Always, instead of, it just shows you what difficulty you beat with all the modifiers and everything afterwards, and just gives you a nice simple, you beat 6 because it was 3 plus 3, you're done. So I personally like this turned on to always. I find it's a little bit easier because you just see what difficulty you beat. Roll buttons on character sheets is super nice. It just puts a little buttons on the character sheets themselves. Dice tray is, it adds a thing on the side of the character sheets that give generic dice of the D6, D10, D20, and D100. I also suggest to put this on as well. I usually like it on the right. Doesn't matter if you have it on, but if you don't have the mod that gives you the dice system tray down here, you're probably going to want that, because then in the character sheet you'll have a dice tray right on the side here. Use all-in-one dialogue as default. I usually have this turned on, because right now if I were to roll something, let's show an example here. If I were to roll something, it just rolls basic. If you want to roll to apply effort or assets or anything like that, you have to alt click on it to bring up the roll dialogue. The thing is, I find we are so often adjusting things with assets and effort and everything like this that we're using the roll dialogue more often than not. Very rarely are my players actually just clicking and letting it go where it may. So I prefer if we use the all-in-one dialogue as default. So I have that turned on, because that way you can always make sure you've got any assets applied, you've got your effort and everything every time you roll. I just find it a lot easier. So I suggest use the all-in-one dialogue as default. That's a personal preference. Once again, all of these things are personal preferences. Defaults would work just fine. This is just how I run it. Default identification status. So this is if your ciphers and artifacts are identified by default when they go onto the character sheet, or if they just say unidentified and only the GM can actually see what they are. So you can either use the item settings, in which case it depends on the item itself if it's flagged as identified or not. Or you can have it set to always identified or always unidentified. Once again, completely up to you. I run different games in different ways, personally. A lot of times I have everything identified by default if I want more of a faster pace, like, I don't care, let's just go, go, go. But if you want a little more like mystery in the objects they're picking up, you could always set it to any of the other settings. Doesn't really matter. Show welcome message is this right here. Let's get rid of that. Show welcome message is this with all these links and everything. Once you've gone through and maybe watched this video, I don't think you'll need it anymore. You can turn that off. Let's go to, we don't need to worry about compendium folders. That's completely up to you. If you use compendium folders, that's its own thing, not really Cypher. Cypher System Combat Tracker is another one I suggest. It's only got the two options. Color-coded combatants use token images. Just leave that as default. It's probably fine unless you want the token images in the combat. Whatever. You don't got to worry about libwrapper. Nice system add-ons. By default, everything should be checked. I would just leave that. It's good. You don't have to touch it. That's pretty much it. Really, those only those adjustments in there for the actual Cypher system is what you have to worry about. I wouldn't worry too much about the Cypher system add-on stuff. Now, one note I wanted to make about all of the stuff that you get here, and then including like you get all of like the different like armors and equipments and everything. Once again, the SRD has everything plugged into it that you need to run. If you have that installed, you should not have to type anything in if you want to run everything that's available in the SRD, which is totally free and capable to do. So it's great. If you want to do your own setup, like I have, because I prefer to organize things a bit differently. You'll see like equipment, for example. I have all the equipment in one compendium, but because I'm using compendium folders, I'm able to organize it a little bit easier. Same thing for basically everything. Character options, once again, I've got stuff in here that is not part of the SRD, which is why I can't share this, but I do prefer things where if you look in here in journal entries and you go to foci, you see that they have, Marco has put one foci per entry within these, but ever since version 9, when journals were able to have more than one part to the journal, I decided to do things like my foci look like this, where like each foci is their own entry in one journal entry. I find it compacts it a bit more. So feel free, if you want to do something like that, you totally can. I'm not going to get into the details of how I did that or how I made it a mod. I think that's its own video entirely. But just know that it's still well organized. Marco did a great job, but there's other ways you can do it if you wanted to. So for everything I'm doing in the system from like this point on, Marco's written documentation on the Cypher system for Foundry in his site, basically. I will put the link for it down below. So if you don't feel like watching the whole video, or you don't know what you want to look up, or even you want to peruse text instead of video, Marco has everything, so I will make sure you got an easy way to get there. One thing I thought was very handy that I've started doing recently is making sure that we have some sort of referenced SRD. Now, Marco's got all of the rules in the compendiums here. You see he's got the rule books. Also, we have a really nicely interactable SRD by Old Gus. And we bring that up here. So you'll see it takes a second to load the first time you load it, but after that, you're golden for the rest of the session. And because this is being brought in from a remote website, it's not being drawn from your server. So if your server is already maybe struggling a bit, or we've got a lot of things to the players and they're worried about it lagging out or something, this SRD is not technically being streamed by the server. It's just referencing an external website, which is really cool. And we got all sorts of things. I use this all the time right now. Here, let's do this so we can really expand it. He's programmed this very well. If for some reason you do need it smaller, and you do this, it will change to like a mobile, like as if you were viewing this on a phone, which is really nice. And if you stretch it out, it reformats it to be more like if it was on a computer, which you probably are. But things like, I want the task difficulty. I click that, it scrolls down to task difficulty, boom. I've got references for that. Hazards. How much damage do hazards normally do? Oh, that's amazing. Great. You want to go through different like flavors. Okay, so here's the different flavors, what they do. What does magic flavor do? We click that. Oh, what's Blessing of the Gods? Brings us down to Blessing of the Gods. It's amazing. I click the back button on my mouse because I have one for browsing and stuff, and it brings me back to where I was. It's so good. I highly suggest doing this. It will be great for both the GM and the players for easy reference for everything in the game. To set this up is really easy. Create a new journal entry. Here, let's do it step by step here. Create a new journal entry. We're going to say SRD example for now. Doesn't matter. Once you've got a new journal entry here, we're going to add a page. We're going to keep it as text. We're going to type it as a thing. Doesn't matter what you name it. And it brings it up here. Now, what we want to do, and this will work no matter which editor you're using, the default text markdown or tiny MCE, but you can just keep it on the default. You don't have to monkey with anything. Click on the source HTML button. And it changes here to be a little more plain text thing because you're just typing in like HTML source. And then what we go do is we type this in. Now I have this formatted at a height of 750 pixels by width of 100%. So 100% of whatever you have it stretched to. I find this is the best formatting dimensions probably for like a 1080p screen, like what I'm showing here right now. For those of us that run a higher resolution monitor, normally, like, this would look a bit different for me because I actually have like a high resolution ultra wide monitor as my main. You might want to change this if you are predominantly viewing it and it's for that higher amount. Otherwise, this is formatted for 1080p because that is the most common thing that a lot of your players will be using. I will have this linked in the description below as well. Very easy. You can just copy and paste it in here and you're done. So you click save and it loads. Done. Now you've got it set up. I highly suggest doing this. It will make your life so much easier. And once again, you have 100% of the rules very, very easily referenced anywhere here. Let's start getting into the character sheets. Now in Foundry, you probably know how to make a character. Click the create character actor or create actor if you have permissions for it. Your GM may not allow you to have permissions for creating an actor, so we'll find out. I have one here, Exemplar the Defaultist. Now, except for the fact I've made like a skill, couple of weapons and abilities and stuff, everything else is just completely default. This is what your character sheet will look like. We're going to go through how all of the rollers work. We're going to go through all of the settings and everything like that right now. Because Cypher is a universal system and there's so many little dials and knobs that you can adjust when you're running a game of Cypher, Marco has had to make this character sheet very customizable. He's done a bang-up job with it because there's a lot of things that can change depending on the type of game that you're running. So we're going to go through all of that. I think before we go through the functionality of how the rollers work and everything like that, we should probably head over to the settings and explore everything within the settings of the character sheet. Right off the bat, first thing we start out with is game mode. Now, if you're playing Cypher and you've just got like a custom setup or whatnot, 10-1, you're just sticking with the Cypher System game mode. You're done. You're good. You can customize it after that if you're pulling things in from other settings or whatnot, but you're probably okay. Now, there are two other game modes, Unmasked and the Strange. The reason for these is because they have very particular rules, with Unmasked having your like masked and unmasked identities, and the Strange because every time you translate to a new location, your focus and abilities may change. So these setups will automatically change some things for you within it. As you go through, you see like this has like mask, teen, stuff like that. Additional sentence field. Now, this is useful for one of two things. If you are in the Strange, this additional sentence field will be your recursion, and it will be set up that you can't change it because that will change depending on your settings and the tags. Otherwise, if you're just in the Cypher system, you can name it whatever you want. I tend to use it for flavors. So I'll just call it flavor, get rid of the other text. And that way the players will have an area, because I tend to use flavors in my game. I find it very handy. I'm going to return this back to default after each setting and I explain it. Additional pool. You see right now there's the three main pools, might, speed, and intellect. Well, if you have an additional pool, you can set this up here. I don't think there's too many instances where an additional pool is part of the actual rules as written in any of the settings. I can't remember any offhand, but I've used it for various things over time. Luck, for example, is like the default example, but you could use it for a bunch of different things. Maybe in like a post-apocalyptic game, it could represent like your levels of disease or who knows, whatever you want it to be. Yeah, with additional pools, you can also set it to have its own edge value if you wish, just like the other pools. The tags tab. Okay, tags are like their own thing within this system. I actually feel like this is one of the few things I'm going to do a separate video on, because it's got its own level of depth and complexity to it. It's very, very handy. It allows you to do things like automatically adjust statistics depending on what abilities you're using, automatically archive or bring forth like any sort of equipment, abilities, skills. Tags are super useful in this, but they are a bit more of an advanced thing that you don't need per se. So I think I'm going to make that a separate video. Hide archive. Okay. So you click it and nothing seems to happen right away, because what happens is say you have an ability here and you've used the ability, and you know, like the ability is not able to be used until you've done like a 10-hour recovery roll or something. You could easily click this archive button and it'll just gray it out. And you know that it's been used, it lets you know, stuff like that. You could archive it for many reasons. Maybe it's a cipher you've used, but you want to remember it's active. So you do it to a cipher, something like that. And then if you click the button, it comes back. But if you click hide archive, and we go back and we do the same thing, and we click it, it just goes away. And then it's gone. But don't worry, if you unclick the hide archive, it shows up again. We can unarchive it. It depends on what you do. I don't tend to use that option much myself, but it's a nice handy feature if for some reason it's something you find useful. We get some sheet design, just like cosmetic stuff, background image, like Cypher blue. Sometimes I prefer the Cypher blue myself over like the regular Foundry default. There's all sorts of ones, including Pride, if you want, or you can do a custom one. Background icon, which is It's not something I use personally, but like it adds a little like icon to the back here. Not something I do because I find it gets a bit busy, but it's neat. Cypher logo, of course, controls this bit. So you could have none and then just have it so if you only have 3, it stretches it out. Skills tab. So there are multiple categories of skills that you have here. So notice right now these skills are just in the skills area. You can, in the skills categories, make categories for them. I tend to do combat, active, and mental so that as you go through, you can go into and edit a skill and set it to, say, this one's going to be an active skill. You can sort your skills by rating. It'll just adjust them. If you have a bunch trained, a bunch in it with an inability, and then like ones with like that are just practiced, it'll just sort it by that. Power shifts. So power shifts were put under the skills category. Partly because your abilities category can get a bit chunky after a while, so it's probably better to put them in somewhere else at that point. Power shifts, you're playing like superheroes or anything with that extra level of power, your power shifts are going to end up going here. You can change your recovery rolls, which once again, we'll go through all of these tabs in the future. Say your 10-minute recovery roll becomes a 1-action recovery roll. You can always set your 10-minute recovery roll to 0 and your 1-action recovery rolls to 2. And then when we look at our recovery rolls, we'll see that it's set up like that. Lasting permanent damages, it depends on whether you're using them or not. I do personally use them, so I usually have this checked on. Ammo lists, that once again, just it depends on if you're using ammunition or not. Some people don't bother with ammo. I use depletion ammo for my Cypher Foundations book. Check it out. So I still have an ammos list, but it's not like normal ammo. It's not like bang, I lose an ammo, bang, I lose an ammo. I have mine's a little more cinematic. Ability categories, just like skill categories, you can have combat, active, mental, etc. I tend to organize them myself, like action to initiate, and enabler, just to help create categories and separate them. Personally, that's how I do it. I see a lot of people also do abilities where it's like focus and type and, you know, whatever, what have you. There's also a fourth one for spells if you are running with the optional spells rules. Currency. If you turn on, you can have multiple levels of currency, up to 6, or you can just have the 1. And default here is for the 1 is just shins because of Numenera. That's what they use, but you can call it anything. And you'll see that it would name it there to whatever the currency is. And you don't have to have currency. You can hide currency names in equipment tab for tooltip mode only. So say we have like this. We've got a bunch of currencies. Go to equipment. It doesn't show what they are. It's only if we hold our cursor over it that it would appear. Otherwise, if we do show it, it would show them over top. I don't always use currencies. Depends on the game. Once again, I've got a wealth resource in my Cypher Foundations book I like to use, so I don't always use currency myself. Ciphers, artifacts, oddities, crafting materials, whether you have them on or off. Ciphers is on by default. Artifacts, I think, should probably be on by default. You're probably going to come across artifacts in your games, no matter the genre. Oddities is hit and miss. Once again, you can rename these things. In my Windermere Fantasy Online, because it's like an MMO isekai thing, I actually have oddities renamed as quest items. So when you go to equipment, you'll see as quest items there instead. And then crafting materials, which by default is iotum and parts. That's more of a Numenera thing. You could just like rename it crafting mats. And then it'll just show us like crafting mats. Cool. Sort crafting materials by level. This is really important if you do have a bunch of crafting materials in here and they have different levels, like in Numenera. My group in Numenera always forgot what was what and what levels each crafting material was because they're all like these esoteric names. So that can be really handy to have. That is the settings for the character sheets. That's probably one of the most complicated parts of the entire system, just because, once again, Cypher has a billion dials and knobs. So you've really got to be able to customize the character sheet for what you're doing. Let's go top to bottom, and then we'll go through each tab and we'll show you everything that's going on. You've got your name. You've got your picture, probably upload from somewhere. your descriptor, type, focus, and of course if you have like a fourth box or you're in the strange with recursions, there will be a fourth box there. If you put in the mods that I suggested with the SRD compendium content, the character creation content, and the nice Cypher System add-ons mod, then you get another really nice feature going on here. Let's go back to the compendiums. Let's go to the journal entries. Let's find, say, a good foci. Bears a halo of fire. We can click, drag, and it goes right there. As long as those mods are installed, we've got it right on our character sheet. This way we can see, hey, we have bears a halo of fire. Awesome. We can do this with the types as well. Say we're an adept. And let's give him a descriptor. Descriptor, we're going to say that they are guarded. And the nice thing about these is you will see that there are automatic adjustments with some of these as they're dragged in. They will automatically set things up for you, which is beautiful. If you start rapid fire replacing them, this may adjust it in a way that you don't want. So you're going to want to reset your stats to like 10. But otherwise, yeah, this all sets it up nice and appropriate for you, which is really nice. Your 10 to 1, you're starting at tier 1. There are people that do like a tier 0 start, which is like usually like a custom rule, but 10 to 1, you're starting at tier 1. You might start it later. That's up to you. You know how the Cypher rules work. I'm not here in this video to tell you how that works. If you start at tier 1, 10 to 1, your effort is also at tier 1, and you're starting with 0 experience. As you progress and advance your character, you are probably familiar with the fact that you spend 4 experience and you get stat pools, an effort, an edge, skill, or one of the other things like extra points in your recovery roll, lowering the cost on using armor, stuff like this. So basically, as you advance, you just click these boxes. And once you've clicked the 4th one, you're like, hey, I tiered up. And you like tier up and then you're good. Next are your stat pools. Okay, so you see that like I automatically got the stat pools from the 3 things here. Okay. I would have 6 extra points laying around, like put them into like intellect here, for example. You also have your edge scores. We automatically started with an edge of 1. Say we had like an edge of 2. Cool. As stats are used for abilities, applying effort, etc., they will go down. You can either click the buttons to make it go up or down. You can type it in. Doesn't matter. If your stat pool ends up getting completely refreshed, you just click that, bring it back up. Stuff like this. Super handy. Super handy. There are little roll buttons if you're just making a straight up task using a stat, like an intellect task. Which if you don't have a skill or ability is not unusual to do. We're in the skills, you've got your skill categories, however you have them set up in the settings. You can add a new skill here, assuming you aren't drag and dropping it from somewhere else. Settings for skills, so we click on that. So we've got our rating. Is it specialized, trained, practiced, or an inability? And it will color code it depending, like you see specialized, trained, practiced is gray, stuff like that. Inability is red. It will automatically adjust things for us. Let's get into the settings, shall we? So, of course, sorting, we can choose which one of the categories that we have set up we want this to be in. Say we want this to be an active skill. It will now put it into the active area for us. Use roll results as initiative. So if this is, say this was our initiative skill, and I click this, you will notice it is no longer the D20 icon. It is now this crossed sword icon, because when you click this and it brings up the roller just like before, gotta have an active combat, it will add you to the combat list and it will act as your initiative. So that is super, super handy. Depending on the skill, there may be times where like you don't know which pool you're going to be rolling it under. If it's like a thievery skill, for example, it might be speed sometimes if you're picking a pocket, or it might be intellect sometimes if it's like knowledge about thievery. So like, yeah. But if you know it's specifically going to be a certain pool, like say it is, say it's pushing objects, it's probably going to be might. So you can just set it to be on that specific pool. Assets. If for some reason you have an ability or something that gives you a built-in asset, you can have your 1 or 2 assets here. Remember, in Cypher, you can only have up to 2 assets. Effort to ease tasks or effort for other uses. This isn't something you would normally set up in the skill. Basically, this sets it so that it's always applying levels of effort for the skill. This is not something I would personally use. I think it's a neat option in here if you're just like, I'm always going to give her. If something is being used as an attack, because you will see that the options for everything are basically exactly the same, whether this is a skill, with these options at least, whether this is a skill or an attack or whatever for the most part. So if you have a skill or ability or something that also acts as an attack, you can put that here. So this is a great way if you set up as, let's say like weapons light. So say this is a light weapons skill. Put this down as like trained. Say you're trained in light weapons. And this is great for just like generic, like I'm just rolling light weapons and I don't need a special weapon built for it or anything. You can just put the damage for the light weapon right in there. Effort for extra damage. If you wanted to auto apply effort for extra damage, if it's an attack, once again, not something I would normally personally use. I'd rather do that on the roll. Difficulty, if it's eased or hindered by anything. For example, if this was just being light weapons, for example, it would actually be eased by 1 because all light weapons are eased by 1. Bonus or penalty to roll. You're not going to see this very often. This is kind of a leftover from original Numenera and I think the Strange as well. This is something that was phased out over time. You're only really going to see it in those ones. It used to be that there were very specific circumstances that would add a +1 or a +2 to the roll. That's phased out. And pool point cost, if for some reason you have an ability or a skill or something that always costs extra points on from the pool. For skills, you're not going to see that too often. For abilities, you will more often though. Combat! First, we have our damage track, which you will be fairly familiar with. As you lose points in your pools, you go down to the damage track. So hail is, of course, you're perfectly healthy, perfectly fine. Impaired, and you see as you click them, it gives you exactly what happens here. And it auto-calculates things for it. Like the extra effort costs per level is auto-calculated, so everything's gravy there. And debilitated, of course, lets you know, can't do actions, can't move if your speed is 0, blah, blah, blah. So, you also have your recovery rolls. Now, once again, in settings, you could set up different recovery roll amounts and whatnot. But if you just want to roll a recovery roll, just click this button. It auto checks them for you, so you don't have to check it yourself. Rolls it for you. You still have to manually apply because you get to choose where the points are going. It can't automatically do it for you. But yeah, you click it and it keeps checking it for you. And then once you've like actually gone through them all and you can reset it, boom, it's reset. Lasting damage. This is something you may or may not be using. I personally do use lasting damages. I use them kind of sometimes like lasting damages and sometimes like status effects. So for instance, like bleeding, I have like a bleeding effect here that may apply, say like 2 bleeding. And you know, every time you make a recovery roll or receive healing, it's lowered by 1, blah, blah, whatever. So if you have lasting damages, you can either create a new one or you can drag and drop them there. Attacks. You can have specific weapons here. I've got like what I just covered here with the weapons light. You could do if it's generic. If it's like a specific weapon, like here, for example, let's go to equipment here. Here, let's bring in a battle axe specifically. So the battle axe is a medium weapon. Let's get rid of all these other ones. We don't need them right now. You can create a new weapon, of course, but these are what the weapons look like. So this is a battle axe, for example, for medium weapon. It's not eased by anything. Doesn't really have any special notes on it. We can set it for whatever. With this character, it would probably be a might thing, so I'd set it up for that. None of this other stuff probably needs to be adjusted. And then you would click, the roll dialog would come up and you'd attack with it. I'll explain the roll dialog in a moment, but I want to show an example attack. So say we did say we want to apply a level of effort or extra damage. That's good. We're going to roll. There we go. So it gives like the full breakdown here. It shows what difficulty we're currently beating. We rolled a 9. We didn't have any modifiers, so that's just a straight difficulty 3. The base damage had a +3 to it, so 4 + 3, it shows the total damage is 7, so it's got a nice breakdown there, which is super, super awesome. Ammo, once again, if you're using ammo of any kind, ammo is super simple. It's just ammo and then quantity and level, and that's ammo. That's it. That's done. Armor, of course. You can add new armors there if you want. You can set your armors here, your armor rating, your speed cost, what type of armor it is, if it's something special, any notes, and then, of course, description, picture, everything like that. If you have multiple armors, for example, let's add like another armor here, new armor that has like 2, and then for some reason a whopping 5 speed costs, because that's ridiculous. You will see that it gives you a total here. So you'll have like a 3 on your armor, but like a 6 on the speed cost. And if you were, and it auto calculates it. So the speed cost, if I were to like do one, like a speed task here and apply a level of effort, it's going to cost me 9 points because of that extra 6. Abilities. Now, depending on your setup with which mods you have installed, it when you drag things in, it may automatically give you like the tier 1 abilities, and you just kind of like weed out the ones that you didn't want. In this case, I've just cleared them just so we can plainly show what abilities do. So we'll just add a new ability. So generally, abilities will maybe have a point cost, maybe not. If they do have a point cost, it'll be like 3 and then like speed or something. Description, picture. These settings are basically the exact same as the skill settings were. Choose where you want it to be sorted to. The only thing it doesn't have is the training levels. And then, of course, like, do you have any assets? Are you playing? If there's any damage, difficulties, eased by bonuses or penalties. Pretty much the same thing. So then you have your abilities and you're good. And then when you click it, it depends on whether you, once again, you have the rolling window turned on by default. I do because I prefer it. You click it and it's got all the stuff here. It auto pays it for you. It shows you a complete breakdown. Like this will cost me a speed effort +6 per level because of insane armor we've got on right now. Equipment. So basic equipment is just basic equipment. It's just like if you had a backpack or something. You know, you can have a picture, a level, how many you have, equipment, description, you're done. Ciphers. If you have ciphers, this is where you're going to find them. Let's just drag in like a random fantasy cipher. Say we got like animal control. So depending on your settings, when you first drag them over, they may show what they are immediately. However, by default, they are unidentified. I like running everything identified personally, but by default, they're unidentified. So the player sees this. The GM can still go in and see what the cipher is by clicking on the edit button, including the current level. And if the player wants to identify it, what they can do is the GM can either go in here and click on this and just identify it, or the player could have clicked on that on their character sheet and it requests it in the dialog box here saying, hey, I want something identified, and the GM can just click in the chat box to say, hey, I'm going to identify it. Okay, don't worry about these trade buttons. I don't use them in this. So, ciphers, also very straightforward, just like everything else. You can set the description. You can set what the level is going to be in the actual entries here. For example, like let's go into like my cipher settings. So animal control is set as 1d6 + 2. It says 6 here because that's what it rolled when it was dragged in. And yeah, you're all set. There's your ciphers. As you use them, you can archive them to show that, hey, they're going to go away. Also, you can alt-click an archive thing to just delete it instead. If all else fails and you forget what button to press, it's Alt. Same thing with like showing something to chat. You can Alt-click on a name and something and it goes into chat like that, which is pretty cool. Artifacts, much the same thing. Let's get a random artifact here. Fantasy artifact, say alchemist bag. So once again, we have level. It was a random level. It was 1d6. It rolled a 2 for this particular artifact. It has the depletion rate. So it's in this case, it's a 1 in 1d20. So what the player can do is they can click it and it'll roll for the depletion for them to see whether the artifact goes boom or not. Not much else in the settings. You can have the name for the unidentified. You can be like, it is a strange, it is a strange object. And then if it's unidentified, then you see it would just say strange object. And then everything else is just other objects and oddities, just something with the level. Crafting materials, once again with a quantity and a level. Okay, next, notes. You want to write notes? You can write notes. That's easy. GM notes. Only the GM sees this. If the GM wants to write notes in your character sheet to remember shit about your character, they can write it right here. Descriptions. You can write description of your character. Done. There will be sometimes another tag here if you are once again playing in the strange or you have the tags tab active. You'll see it looks different depending on whether you're in the strange or not. So there are different types of tags. We'll go through exactly what tags are and how they work in a separate video, because I think that is something. I know I said I wanted to put everything in one video, but I think tags needs its own thing. All right, the only thing we have really left to do and cover on the character sheet is the roller. So the roller is super easy. So first of all, base difficulty, if you are the type of GM that actually tells your players what the difficulty is, and you're not like me, who's an asshat and just gives a vague description, then players can actually put the difficulty they're aiming for here. Like say we're going to be going for a difficulty of 3 by default. You can set what pool this is going to be. So in this case, we had clicked on the intellect task. So we are going to be rolling off of intellect. We can custom describe if it's inability, practice, train, specialized. And you're wondering, well, wow, why would I need this in an intellect task? Well, this is useful in times like, I think it's anecdote. There's some abilities that give you temporary training in a skill. So without adding the skill, you can just be like, oh, I'm trained in it. Boom. Do you have any assets? Say there's like an asset to it. Do we want to apply a level of effort? Now, right now, we apply a level of effort and we say it's going to be eased by 3 steps. We see that there's going to be a cost to it, which is really cool. We're going to see what our edge is going to be when it's done. What if we try to apply 2 levels of effort despite our effort score only being 1? Oh, big red. Oh, too many levels of effort. What are you doing? Because it tells you 2 out of 1. That's no good. So you got to go back down. This shows that you can't do like effort for damage and effort for anything else because you've got too many levels of effort. So yeah. So effort for other uses, which is useful mostly for abilities, but you never know. Damage, of course, if for some reason this attack should deal damage, you can put it in there. Effort for extra damage, if you're applying effort for extra damage, let's get rid of that. And then, of course, if it's eased or hindered by any amount, you can put it in here. The bonus or penalty to roll, once again, it's a Numenera and I think the strange leftover that you don't see in any of the like revised edition and up like Cypher System stuff. That's gone. And then pool point cost, if it has a base cost, sometimes even with general tasks, a GM might say, hey, this is an extreme task. I mean, it's going to cost you extra 2. Boom. All right. I should actually show clicking the roll. Let's do like apply like a level of effort and then we'll roll it. So for example, this one beat difficulty 2. So not too bad. That is basically the character sheet. Excellent. Okay. So before we get into the combat bit, let's look at the NPC sheets, shall we? So NPC sheets are fairly simple because NPCs in Cypher are fairly simple. So you start out, you've got your, just like everything else, your name and picture. It's got a level because, I mean, everything in Cypher has a level. This is where its health is stored, how much base damage it's doing. Of course, things can be different depending on abilities of the creature, how much armor it has. So notes is you generally have all your standard stats for your creature, including like GM intrusions, what they do in combat, stuff like that. Description, if you want to write like fancy descriptions to show to the players. If players have like a limited ability to see their stats, they might just see the description and nothing else, which is cool. Inventory, if for some reason your guy actually has stuff in their inventory, you can actually put it in here and then you can have it drag and dropped over afterwards, which is really nice. So let's do this. We're going to go here into combat. Now we're going to add the Basilisk to combat. Now it is a level 5 creature, which means by default it is going on a 15. They have a set initiative amount depending on their level. You can, of course, adjust this. If for some reason, say the Basilisk had a modification to make its initiative better, you can always update the combatant, and by default it's set to 0.5 less than normal, so that if a PC were to go on that 15, it would go before the Basilisk. But if for some reason the Basilisk had, like, say, a +1 level for initiative, which would be a +3 to the value, you could do 17.5 and it would bring it up. Now the player needs to roll their initiative. So let's set one of these as initiative value, just as I showed before. So this is their initiative score. We click on this, say we're going to apply an effort to ease task to try and get up there. Boom, shows initiative. So you see that we rolled really good, actually. So it was trained and we applied a level of effort, so it was +2 in the task. We rolled a 6 + 2. That is a difficulty of 8 or an initiative value of 24. So we're up there. We're doing good. Because of the Cypher Combat add-on. These are not only color-coded. Actually, the Basilisk is for some reason set to neutral, so it's yellow when it should be red as hostile. But we also have nice little things here. You can toggle visibility on or off. Is it impaired, debilitated, or dead? You can toggle dead there as well. We see the health, damage, and armor of the creature. We see all 3 stats of the player. So, yeah, it shows a lot there. And of course, there's all the other Foundry bells and whistles you can do in here that I'm not going to go over all of these, but they're handy to play around with. We begin combat. So then we see that the current person we are on is Exemplar, the defaultist. They do their turn, whatever they do. We click next, goes to the Basilisk, highlights it. We see which one we're on. There are some mods that make this a little bit cooler, with like rotating things to show which token is active and stuff like this. Since Cypher is Theater of the Mind, you don't need this as often, so it's optional. I do live streaming, so I tend to like to show this stuff. Yeah, you just go through their turns, see rounds are counting up, and eventually once they have gone kaputsk and they're dead, we can end combat and done. Awesome. Okay, there's a few more nice little toys here between the mods that I told you to install, as well as the stuff that Marco has put in. We're going to go down. We've got a couple of extra tools here, as well as an extra thing here. And we'll go through a couple of the marker stuff as well. So first of all, we're going to go down and we're going to go to Calculate Difficulty. This is really cool. So you can put in, if you're the GM and you want to assign a certain specific difficulty, you can be like, okay, I want the base is going to be a 4. And then there's all these other flags, you know, if they have cover or they're standing or prone, and it'll automatically adjust the difficulty for you. We're going to calculate, we're going to say, okay, that is a difficulty 4 task. And then when a player rolls, it will show if it's a success or a failure. This is really handy if you want players to know if it's a failure or not, as well as you can go through and make sure that you know, it's point blank, but they're cloaked in mist and they're moving, and the difficulty is they're a level 2 creature and the player is the passive or the target. Calculate, and then you know that all of that stuff goes together, and then you see the final difficulty is a 1. So this is great if you're not sure what you want the difficulty to be, and it will display it appropriately. You can set it whether it shows the difficulty to everybody. You can even do whisper difficulty to GM, but show vague difficulty to players, which is really cool. So say let's do a 5, target a couple of random things, calculate, and we get a whispered thing showing it's a difficulty 6, but the player gets this is a hard task, likely requiring some effort. Next is the GM intrusions, or proposing an intrusion. There are 2 ways to do this. If you have the nice Cypher System add-ons. So I believe the propose intrusion button here, I believe, is in the base Cypher System. You can click it. There are no PCs you could propose an intrusion to. I don't have anyone online right now, so clicking this will not work, unfortunately. Normally it brings a pop-up box and you can select which player you're going to be giving the intrusion to. However, you can also, if you have the nice Cypher Systems add-on, you can right-click and do the intrusion button right on their token. And here they will have an accept, or if they actually have experience, there we go. They actually have experience, then they will have an accept or refuse. If they accept, then normally a pop-up box, I'm a GM right now, so it doesn't show it, but normally the pop-up boxes show up and they get to choose who gets the other experience, and they can choose from the player list. I have no player list in this, it's just the GM, so there's no one to give it to. But normally they can accept and then you're good. The GM intrusion range. This is really handy for numerous setups, like if you're running horror mode or something and you want to increase the intrusion range. So say the intrusion range was like a 1 to 8 and we rolled difficulty 1, a 3, so it's a 3 on the die, but because the GM intrusion rate is an 8 right now, it is actually giving us a GM intrusion. You can do all global. You can also do individual players. I don't have any other. This would show the other players if they were here. Unfortunately, once again, I don't have that set up. But you can do custom GM intrusion ratings for each player. This will be useful for a lot of things, including my book when it comes out, as players will have individual stress levels. Oh, there are various actor types. There's NPC creatures, of course, companions, which is interesting. So if you have a companion, you can be like, you know, it's a friendly pet, because there's technically different types of companions, and owned by, put like player name, what level the companion is, its health, damage, armor, if it has any skills, all of that stuff, which is super cool. Community, if you're running like the community rules from Numenera Destiny, then you've got all your like community stuff for health, infrastructure, everything like that. Vehicles, similar. You can have vehicles, crew, weapon systems. That's right from the Cypher SRD. And markers is if you just need a generic thing of some kind, actor. Maybe it's like a loot chest or something like that. Like you want to show loot to the player. Like say you want to show loot. This is really handy because you can hide the notes and description. Enable everything in the equipment. And then just like set the loot. What did I name this? It's new actor 6. Configure ownership. Set it to like owner. Make sure it's not linked. There you go. So now if you drag this out and as people click on it, it'll be like a loot chest. People could just like click and drag from it and stuff. Items. There are, of course, the plethora of different items that you can create custom. All of these different things, you know, attacks and ciphers, lasting damage, crafting materials, oddities, recursion, skills, tags, etc. We'll get into recursions and tags. Journals, it's just a journal entry. Tables would be useful. I would suggest making some cipher tables. You're not probably going to use cards. Cards in Foundry kind of suck anyways. Playlists if you want to do sounds, and of course your compendiums and stuff like that. One other thing I would like to do is I'd like to go over some markers, because he does have some markers going on here. He has the GM range marker, which is something he had that's kind of redundant now that we have this GM range thing. I imagine it's not going to be staying in here for longer. There was a macro where you could like increase or decrease this GM range marker if you wanted like a visual marker on here. So, I mean, he might keep it around because it's handy, but honestly, like, it's sort of redundant and it doesn't mix in with this too well. The Cypher book marker is, I am not sure for what. But he just has a lot of little, like generic markers here, like, if you need them for any reason. If you guys want to, like, actually, like, have, like, physical XP tokens that you, like, move around. You could do that. The trade one, I mentioned how you could like make a generic trade thing. He's got one set up for you guys already. You just gotta like turn everything on, but it's basically the same thing. So that's pretty cool. Some of these interact with various macros that he has set up, and he does have a few macros. So like some utility macros announcing difficulties, things to do with tags. There's the increasing and decreasing the GMI range for the thing that the token. All sorts of various macros he's created here. I think we've gone through everything that we need to. I'm sure I'm probably missing one or two small bits, but everything that you need to run the system is there. What it really boils down to is set up the world, install those couple of mods, and you're pretty much golden. Everything else is just drag and drop, off you go. Click. You know generally how Cypher works, probably. Everything's in there, you just gotta find the right spot for it. It's simpler than we probably make it seem. It's just there's so many dials and knobs, so many options within Cypher itself, that making a digital system for it is not a simple task. Is a very complex task for him to try and organize all of that. So, yes, check it out. The links for everything will be down below. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, and have a good one.